Okay, now since she has a white face, I am going to, actually I'm going to use a second sponge brush. I'm going to work her face just with this really light gray that I have. And I can start blending this into the muzzle to help diffuse that line. You can see this is barely any color at all, but it's just enough to cover the primer and start building a base. Also want to mention since I just used it, the paper towels that I use, those blue towels there. You can find those at auto stores. Those are my favorite paper towels to use because they are lint-free, really soft and absorbent. So they're meant for when you're working on automobiles, wipe your greasy hands. So they're perfect for oil paint. I'm doing just a small amount of detailing and blending into the eye, but it's pretty rough. Again, remembering that I need to work very quickly. Let's see if I can get my light better here. The best tip for people looking to get into oils, honestly, just start. I mean, if you have not painted models at all before, I don't know if they're going to be the easiest to work with. I think whatever medium you use, there's going to be a learning curve. So I worked with pastels for about 10 years, and half of those 10 years I was actually using oils on canvas, so I was pretty familiar with oils as a medium, just not on model horses. And there was actually even still for me quite a bit of a learning curve. I don't know, but in some ways I guess if you had no other experience with any other media, maybe in some ways it would be easier because you didn't have to unlearn anything, because oils and pastels are pretty different. So I don't know, I guess I don't have anything specific other than if you're interested in doing it, just do it, figure out how to start. I think whatever you do, you're always going to run into challenges and learning curves, but you won't know what's on the other side of those until you just take that plunge. Okay, I can't tell if that was the same person who just said that they've been doing acrylics for the past 3 years. So yeah, if you have some base of working with a medium and another one sounds interesting to you, I say absolutely. Just give it a try. now that I've worked the face, I'm going to go ahead and buff this out again. So normally in most of my layers, I wait until I have everything down before buffing. But because of how fast this first layer starts getting tacky, I'm going to do this right away. I'm just going to clean up a little bit where it's... Sorry, I realize I'm out of the frame too often. Okay. Oh, blending darker tones into lighter tones. So with the exception of this, because obviously I'm getting very smudgy tones right now, but in later layers when I'm not fighting the dry time, I would say, sorry, let me unlock my computer here. I would say just instead of trying to jump from color A to color B, for example, like a color that this is pretty easy to do or to get that smudginess that you don't want is on like a buckskin, where you have black legs that transition into a tan body. So when you mix that tan and that yellow, you're probably often ending up with something that's kind of ugly and greenish. Or if you've waited for the tan to dry and then you're doing the black leg over top of it, you might be getting a really hard to control uneven sort of color. So I would say make sure you mix at least one color that's in between the two, so something that's going to be a buffer. So what I do with buckskins is that usually, at least on the final layer, I'm blending up the leg marking into the base coat after the base coat is dry. So I'll start with a color that's usually, because again, you usually get that sort of greenish tone when you go from the black to the tan. So I'll mix up something that's somewhere in between the two, but pulls more red. So you look at a color wheel, complementary colors, red is going to counteract green. All depends on the exact shades that we're working with, but as a general rule, that's what I'm doing. I'm not like just mixing the black and the green, or the black and the tan together. So I'll use a little bit of that on the legs, just really lightly blending it up into the tan and down onto the black. Then I'll bring the black over top and blend it in. So anytime you're having trouble mixing or blending the edges of two colors together, always think about how can you break that up and build a buffer color. And I think I saw somebody ask about the brand. Sorry, my hands are full, so I can't scroll back if I'm probably missing some questions. But so the brand of oils I use is mostly Daniel Smith. That was what was recommended to me when I first started painting models in oils. But I also supplement with some Winsor Newton, which is what I have long used for my two-dimensional painting. So I don't know, just whatever works. I think when Daniel Smith was first recommended to me, it was because of consistency, but I end up adding medium to all my colors anyway. So I've not noticed a big difference. Now, I have noticed that sometimes specific brands, specific colors will have almost a grainy-like texture, which I really dislike for models. So then I'll just, find another brand. And interestingly, I found that it's not always like the high quality or like the artist grade versus the student grade. Because like the Winsor Newton that I use, I like to use the yellow ochre. That's what this is right here. Their artist line, yellow ochre, I find to be really grainy, strangely. It's very thick and grainy. Whereas their Winton, which is their student line, is really nice, smooth and creamy. So is the pigment not as well? Maybe. I haven't noticed much difference, and I like the texture a lot better. So play around. If you ever get a color that's just, you do not like how it's performing, don't be afraid to switch it up. Okay, and you can see again how even as I'm buffing that off, it's getting pretty grainy looking. It's okay, I know I'll be able to fix that in later layers. But I'm just going section by section and coloring in and buffing away. Okay, let's see if I missed anything. Yes, these are already mixed with the drying agent and the medium. I mixed both of those together in a little pile. You can't see it because it's clear, but there's a little puddle on my palette where I mixed some refined linseed oil and some Galkid Light. And the Galkid Light acts as a dryer. So I mixed those together and mixed those with my paint. Any pearlescent colors in this gray? No, I had not thought about that. Not sure yet. Okay, I think I've got most of the questions there. How long does it take the first layer to actually dry? So this first layer dries like crazy fast. It's like it's already getting tacky as I'm sitting here. That doesn't mean I'm gonna jump right in and do a new layer right away. I would give it at least 24 hours before I do a second layer. Another interesting thing to note right here is that colors on your palette do not always match what's going to happen on the horse. So depending on what color you have underneath. Now this gray, I'm not sure how well you can tell. I guess in the video they look pretty similar. But this gray here looks pretty bluish to me, and it is just bone black and titanium white. And when I brush it on the model thick, it kind of has that same cast, but as I buff it out, it pulls a warmer cast. Again, I don't know if that's actually translated in the video, but that's what I'm seeing here. If you're using anything with white over top of something darker, which is what I will eventually do as I add in dapples, they will pull much, much cooler. So if you're doing a lighter color over top of a darker color, it's gonna look a lot more blue than it does on the palette. So just know to compensate by balancing out, making your mix look a little too brown in comparison. So I'm not doing dapples in this layer, just because, again, with the detail, I don't have enough time to work detail. But in the next layer, I will start building them in. So the next layer, what I'm probably going to do is work some nice deep charcoal grays in thin layers, and I'll build the basic shape of the dapples into those layers. So I'll start building some dimension all around. And what I love about oils, I used to do just pastels, which, I mean, there are artists who do amazing work with pastels and doing dapples. So it's absolutely doable. And like I said, I did it for years. But I really like the ability to a little bit more easily go back and forth from light to dark. So I can start with a darker base and add in lighter dapples on top, come back again with some darker colors to shape around them, come back in with some lighter hairs, etc. I like being able to go both ways. It feels like a little bit easier to manage and less of a mental exercise that doing just pastels was for me, where it's all additive. And I know that artists, you can go backwards, go lighter to some degree, but I find oils to be much more easier for doing that. So I'm making some note of areas that are a bit lighter, kind of blending them. But again, if I go too far one way or the other, I can always fix in later layers. In fact, usually with a gray, I would rather go too dark so that I can lighten it with some hairing detail, like give me some nice hair roan-like texture. And you can definitely do that with dark hairs too, but I usually tend to like the effect of the white hairs better. And if you think of what's actually happening with a gray, it was a color that's being modified by the appearance of lighter hairs growing into the coat. So it just makes sense to me in that way. Yeah, I add in lighter and darker layers after the first layer is complete. So I'm really just going for an overall mid-tone to start with. And in later layers, probably the next layer, I'll have mostly like a dark charcoal gray versus this light medium gray. And I won't go straight white. I'll start with something more, not even as light as my light gray that I had here, but something that's lighter than what you see here. So I'll start building the dapples gradually that way.